Over the next 30 minutes, this particular webinar is designed to give you an overview of the RMSS solution, the RMSS Suite. And obviously in that period of time, it's quite a comprehensive tool. It's difficult for me to go into too much detail. But I guess the aim is for me to give you a feel for how the tool operates, how it performs, to help your evaluation, and hopefully we get to meet with you individually and give a more tailored and a more detailed presentation at a later date. Initially, I'd like to talk about a couple of, I guess, points of difference, and I'm going to use some slides up front, and then I won't go through them all necessarily, but I certainly will then spend as much time as possible in the next 30 minutes on the product itself. I think that's the best way for you to get a feel for the features and functionality. A couple of points I'd like to pick out of this particular slide. Firstly, from a technology point of view, the solution is a zero-footprint web application. So that means it's the same as booking an airline ticket or using the internet banking facilities at your bank. Effectively, there's no software at all that is required on the PC to use the product. Now, that doesn't impact the decision about how you want to actually operate the tool, whether you choose to have it in-house as a purchased product that you actually, your own IT department publishes, either as an internet or an intranet, or alternatively whether you use our cloud solution, which is a software as a service solution where we fully manage everything around the application and provide support, etc., in terms of an annual fee. So the first decision is the software what we want. The software is the same in either way in terms of the way that you actually choose to access the product. The thing is, one of the key differences about RMSS as a technology vendor is that we've spent a lot of time and effort in our research and development ensuring that our tool is very, very flexible. And some key examples of that are our terminology wizard. We have a terminology wizard in the application which allows you as the client to change the forms that you see in front of you, all of the screens in fact, the words on buttons, hiding them, changing them to your terminology, using your acronyms. And the important part of that is not only that you reduce the fitting exercise when we implement the product, so we can effectively have your process and your terminology from day one, but it also reduces the change management aspect of implementing a product, which is always a considerable concern and one that often gets overlooked. By picking up and maintaining on the existing methodologies and knowledge that's been implemented in your organisation, by effectively taking that and putting it online. But really importantly, it also is about the culture of RMSS. We don't pretend to know what you want to have, and we accept that you know the workflows and you understand what it is that you want to do from not only a terminology but from a workflow point of view. And so our tool effectively automates that process, so that's one of our key offerings. I guess another point from a technology aspect is that even though this is a zero-footprint web application, you can access the tool in three ways without using the internet. One way is using a handheld PDA device, so a Windows-based handheld device. They're very cheap, about $400 or $500 you can access them for. And you log onto the application, it synchronises your permissions and your security profile, gives you the data that you can you have access to. Then it allows you to go out in the field without internet connection. Of course, this works on an iPad or an iPhone or any of those things because they've got internet connection. I'm talking about here without any internet connection. And operating in the field where you can do inspections, observations, risk assessments, compliance audits, whatever it might be. And then that data is synchronised back into the application when you return to an area with connectivity. Another way is you can work in a spreadsheet. A number of our clients take advantage of that feature whereby you can use people to interact with the product simply by downloading their information into a spreadsheet. They can manipulate that, change that, and then you can upload it. And the third way is that key components of the application have the ability to work offline in a downloading capability onto the C drive of your tablet or your PC, and you can use that in the field, for example, and then come back and synchronise the data back up. So we think we've sort of taken care of a number of workflows there. That's probably enough from the point of view of those particular slides. What I'd like to do now is show you a bit of an illustration of the design of the application, and it is a three-tier or N-tier design. Pretty typical. It's what you'd expect from any software vendor. The top layer is represented here by the white oblong. It is a modular solution. Our four key enterprise modules are the Risk Manager, which is an ISO 31000 compliant product, looking at identifying, assessing, putting in control frameworks or treatment plans, mitigation strategies, and then being able to obviously run reports, and there's an automatic process behind workflow, etc., in relation to that. But effectively, it is risk, and it's looking at things that have the potential to occur. The compliance manager is a comprehensive module that has 4 key work areas. The first one is about managing obligations. So it's where you can create lists of regulatory and other obligations that you have within your enterprise. You have the ability then to build an assurance program or a testing program against each of those obligations with a series of hierarchies of audits and questionnaires and templates. And then you can get a compliance percentage, and also that is mapped back to the risk manager as well. Once you've done that, the auditing capability believe the compliance manager is very powerful. It's also a survey, innovations, damage, vehicle incident, injury, illness, a range of areas, and it's about then taking you through a process of recording that, being able to investigate that recording, to put in place corrective actions or recommendations for change. Again, it links back into the risk manager and has the ability to run a series of quite comprehensive reports, etc. Finally, the claims manager is about managing litigation, whether it's through workers' compensation or liability, in multiple jurisdictions that they operate in. And the important aspect about each of these 4 modules is that they have something in common in terms of the design, and that is that they use a process of master categories. And there's a slide that I'm going to come to soon that talks about the way we use master categories to drive workflow and terminology. And middle layer. The middle layer itself is very much based around the business rules or the business objects, and what that normally is the case for most vendors is that's hard-coded, or change a word on the user interface. You generally need to get coding completed by that vendor, and as we know, that can cost money, it can take time, and it can also impact on other areas of the application adversely. So we've built in a way of giving you, as a client, a significant amount of flexibility in terms of determining those business rules. We've spoken about terminology, we've spoken about workflow, but other areas such as notifications, reminders and escalations, they themselves actually form part of a wizard process where you can determine what are the triggers for my notification, what is the frequency for that notification, who does it go to, how often is it repeated, etc. And they're all determined by the users of the system, including whether it's an SMS and or an email. Also, the same thing from a reporting point of view. One of the unique aspects of our application is the automatic distribution of key reports. So we have the ability to actually distribute reports on a frequency, whether it's time or trigger basis, to key stakeholders within the organisation. And then finally, the third layer or in one database means that the reporting, the collaboration and the analysis that we can get out of the tool is very, very powerful. So things like being able to pull off our top risks and say, okay, these are our top risks. Let's map them with our events that have had the most significant severity or impact on the organisation. Is there a correlation? How effective is our risk management program? Did we identify these as things that could occur? And the same thing from a compliance point of view. What was the impact and the consequences of compliance breaches that occurred in the organisation? Had we identified them in our risk manager? Were they related to identified controls or processes that should have been in place? So there's a lot of collaboration and a lot of analysis that we can do quite easily, as opposed to having to go to multiple databases and multiple sources of information and then sort of collaborate and pull the whole thing together. So that's a great saving as well. Just in terms of the application design, I just want to touch on that for you, just to use risk as an example, but the same applies to any of the modules that we've spoken about. The way that we build the product is always based in an off-the-shelf process to commence with around a standard. So risk is built around ISO 31000, and this is the old repurposed 4360 diagram, I think, here. But basically what it's talking about is the process of understanding the context, being able to identify risks, being able to analyse and evaluate, being able to treat them or mitigate them, and then having a very important monitoring and review process. So that if you break that down, it's effectively identification, it's assessment, and its control framework or treatment process, and then it's being able to monitor and review. Effectively, 4 steps. And what we've done in our design is we've taken that process and we've built it into the way the application operates. So we look at identification, so we look at the context and the scope, we look at the current controls, and then we go through a process of moving to the second step, which is doing a risk assessment of your choice, and then being able to mitigate or treat them through the third step of the process, and really importantly through dashboards, automatic communication, emails, SMSs, and a very powerful reporting tool. We give you the ability to have honest and immediate review and monitoring capabilities. This next slide is the one that I was talking about in relation to the master categories, and I think I'm going to show you one more slide after this and I'm going to get into the application. So bear with me, if you indulge me if you would. But the purpose of this I think is quite valuable because what it does, it illustrates how we use categories. So for example here, if we just take risk as an example, within risk, each client can have as many categories as they use. The numbers of categories is up to the client and the names that they provide them. So you've probably already got them in your organisation. You probably already structured your risk reporting into various categories. When you're looking at software, that one size doesn't always fit all. It's a big challenge in an organisation to have an identical process across all of the various categories of risk management. And I'm just using risk as an example in the first instance. So what we allow you to do through our software is have the ability, if I look at health and safety, for example, you can have a category called health and safety, whatever you like to call it, and that category can use terminology such as identification of hazards. It can do risk assessments or hazard assessments of those hazards, and it can use the terminology and, importantly, the consequence definitions that belong to the category of safety. So, in other words, consequence definitions could be damage to a finger, through to, incapacity, through to lost time injuries, through to potentially fatality or death. So the consequences are in the language and the genre of the safety category. But concurrently in the application, we could have someone operating a, say, financial risk category. They can have consequences that are dollar-based, that are based around impact on the budget, impact on the organisation, as can any of these. The environment people can talk about impacts and aspects. The project people can talk about opportunities and threats, etc. Now, you can use the product in this way if you choose to do it, and that's the power of the categories. And what it means is that even though all of this data is entered using different terminology, at the end of the day, they're just labels on database, and they're just labels on the user interface. And so you can have an ultimate enterprise or corporate model that allows you to view any of the risks that have been identified in any one of the categories in the corporate model view. So you can effectively review or reassess that risk immediately on the spot without doing anything. The application does it for you and see how the particular risk would apply within the corporate model. That means safety can manage something as a high risk, but when it gets applied to the corporate model, it's a medium or a low risk, for example. The same thing occurs from an event point of view. Each category of event can have a totally different workflow and form. So if I have an injury, I want to collect certain information about that injury. It's going to be different to if I have a property damage or a security breach or a fraud event. And the same thing applies to compliance. So the process of categories is a very important design feature of our application. Obviously, the disparate risks registers allow you to have multiple registers at any time. But I think I'd better to show a lot of this to you on the application. And this will be the last slide. And the reason I want to bring up this slide is that the RMSS Suite is an enterprise risk intelligence tool, and at its highest utilisation can be very powerful and very broad and can be a true enterprise application. But in reality, 25–30% of our clients operate it like that. The balance of the people, or the clients that are using the product, are on a journey. They're commencing at some point, perhaps only in one of those categories. It might be safety or finance or projects, and they're in the process of growing and evolving. And that's one of the great things about our software, is that you can start wherever you are and grow with the tool. You don't have to go through a magnificent, massive change management exercise to implement enterprise risk intelligence across the organisation from day one. We can take you on a journey there. And effectively, this is an example of one of our clients in the mining industry, and it shows you how they started with our product. They started by using our event manager. And what they did is they began through the process of simply just being notified about events. So previous to having our tool, one of their hard challenges was actually knowing what was occurring in the organisation, what property damage was happening, what injuries were occurring, etc. The second step on their evolution was to move into an investigation process where they actually said, well, why did this event happen? What were the causations of this particular event? Once they did that, they then moved into the processes of recommending corrective actions or things that they needed to do to address the causes that were commonly coming up as a result of the events that they were having. So as they're doing this, they're really starting to become more preventative in their workflow. And then once they implemented the third step, the next logical step for them was to actually use a compliance process, effectively an auditing or an assurance process, to determine whether those recommended actions that were driven out of the investigation were actually in place, were they actually put in place, number one, and also number two, were they actually working? Did they actually have an impact on the reduction of the event and the associated loss to the organisation? So that was quite a significant step. The next part of the process is about moving to an area where we start to build in risk. Now, one of the advantages of the software is step 5 is actually automatically created for you as a result of doing step 3 and step 4. So, in other words, there is a risk mapping exercise in our tool that looks at the causations of events and automatically identifies them as risks in the same areas and similar areas within the organisation. As there is with the compliance process in step 4, where there's a breach or a break in the control or the corrective action wasn't put in place or it doesn't work, that's also automatically re-identified as a risk. So as a result of 3 and 4, automatically they had risk registers that were driven from events. They may not be totally comprehensive, but they were certainly a very, very good start. And they all of a sudden started to really begin a journey of preventative methodology here. Step 6 was that they then saw the benefit of having those risks identified and putting in place more preventative activities, but they then started to say, well, let's look across the whole enterprise, across the whole organisation. And what they did is, using the ISO 31000 process, they actually then ran some workshops and started to identify what were the top risks in the organisation, and they then obviously used the product to start to manage those. So the things that were significant, we're going to kill people, we're going to close the business down, whatever it might have been. The next step was then when they started to integrate all of those key areas across the organisation, across different categories of risk management, and both internal and external obligations were being managed, etc. And then finally they got to a point where they had a full collaboration and analysis, which is enterprise risk intelligence, where their risk event and compliance processes were in one place, were linked, and were able to report and analyse the information that they were getting across. So that was a journey that took some time, but it just illustrates, and the reason I wanted to show it, it illustrates the power of the software in terms of you don't need to be at the right end of the scale. At the moment, you can start wherever you are. Now, I think I'm probably been logged out. I just need to check on that. Let me just go and see if I'm being logged out. No, I'm still in there. That's great. Okay. So what we have here is the application now, and the first and the most critical part of the application is we have a dashboard. And this dashboard, it gives you all of the information you need to know to manage the risks, events, and compliance that are occurring within your area of the organisation. And by area of the organisation, what I mean is every person who has a log on to the application, it belongs to a security group, and they also have a role. So the group is what they can actually see. So the way that the group is created, it's around the organisational structure, it's around the physical structure, it's around their client base and the work, and it's also around the functions that they can see. And all of those areas can be included or excluded from security groups. So some clients have many, many security groups, some clients have a smaller number. And this just simply means that you can restrict the data that people see based on the requirements of the process that you've identified in your organisation. Once someone belongs to a group, which is the data that they can see, they then have a role. And that role is what they can do with what they can see. And the roles can, again, be tailored. There's 164 permissions, and we can create any version of the combination of roles that suit your organisation. So effectively anything from full administration rights through to only ability to read. So the combination of role and group work very powerfully, and they determine what we see. Now, Clients can also determine to have personalised dashboards. People can tailor them, saying I don't want to see these things, and I need to have this moved up here, and I can move this one. I don't want that one there, and they can set it up as they like, and they can select other graphs and information to be part of the dashboard. Or alternatively, you can lock down the view for them and say, you're a supervisor, this is the role, or this is the dashboard that you'll get. So there's options around the way that works. So what I'd like to do is just show you some examples of a dashboard in this particular area. The first one I'm going to show you is risk data. So the dashboard's not part of any particular module, but what it's doing is pulling raw data out of the modules that you're operating. And in this case, this particular heat map is pulling information out of the risk management module. And what it's showing us here is the categories of risk that we've got in this demonstration database. And those categories, of course, as you know, can be changed for every client and can be reflected and built around your current system and your preferred system. You can add and delete from those as you need to. Now, the colours that are being represented here are being driven from the enterprise module that the client has used. And when I say an enterprise module, I'm talking about a risk management framework that has a corresponding matrix, as we're seeing on the screen now. And we know that those colours are green is low, M is moderate, high, very high, etc. And so those colours are coming through here. And this is showing me the current state. So not the inherent risk, but the current state, the residual risk, if you like, of each of the risks that were identified over a 24-month period. So that's what those numbers represent. So I can go into any of them at any stage, and I can see what the issue was. It can be one or many that were identified. In this case, it's failure of business continuity or disaster planning. I can go into any of them, and I can see the particular issues that have been identified, and I can start to get a bit of a feel for what they might be at any point in time. So I can go through these and identify and see a number of them at any point in time, and I can get one here. I can look at it in more detail. Let's say there's something that I want to understand it in a bit more information. I've got the ability to go through and select on the record number, and what that actually does, it drills down and takes me into the raw data that's behind this particular risk. So I can go right in and I can see the information about it, how it was identified, and all of the further information. So I can drill down, I can see what has been identified, I can again access everything I need to know in terms of that particular risk at any point in time, and I can see how it was identified, whether it's a risk that belongs to any of the categories that I'm looking at any point in time. Okay, so that gives us a bit of an idea how we can access that information. Of course, once you're in the information, you can make changes to it and move on. The other example here is pulling data out of our event management tool. So it's looking at events by event severity. Now, I should point out that anything in white, as we can see here, is just terminology words, and we can change that at any point in time. So I've got event by event security. It might be that in your organisation you refer to them as incidents. So I'll just very quickly show you how we have the ability here to go to the terminology wizard. I can search for the word event. I can search for that. I can change the word event into a different word, say incident. And then I can update that, and then when I go back to my back to my dashboard, I've now got incident by event severity. Now, it didn't change event severity because that's a separate terminology word, so I could have incident by incident severity. I think you get the picture, but it just shows you how very easy it is to operate and change at any point in time. So what this is showing us is the events that have occurred. So unlike the risk matrix, which was risks, this is showing us events that have occurred by the severity. In this case, severity set up as extreme. What are they? I can look at them. I can see I've got a complaint, some environmental issues, and an illness. And I can go into any of the numbers by selecting the incident number, and that drills down and shows me the data that's behind the particular area, how it was assessed, what happened, etc. And I've got the ability to manage it again through there, make changes, and do what I need to do. So I can go into any of these at any stage. I can view the information. I can see what has been selected, and I can go through and manage the process in a number of ways as I need to do that. So yeah, really easy for me to navigate around, point and poke, and access what I need to access. The dashboard allows you to get to the raw data by having no more than 2 clicks of the application, or 2 finger points if you've got an iPad. Okay, this particular, another example here is is a risk matrix. As we described it before, it's part of the risk management framework. It's a way of presenting and showing the risks that have been identified. Now these risks here that are showing are ones that I'm the risk owner for. If I want to know what this one is, I can click on that. And in this occasion, it's not taking me to the raw data, it's actually taking me to a report, a risk register that's showing more information about what it is that I need to look at. So I'm now in a report, and you would think that if I wanted to actually go into that record to find out more inappropriate information, that I'd need to back out. But I've got the ability, even in our report, to put my mouse over inappropriate information, select on that, that then drills down and takes me to the raw data, and I can see here the way it's been assessed. I can see the information about it in any way. So very, very powerful in terms of accessing the data. Back to the same risk register now. Now I want to know more about the control framework. I can press on the control framework area, and that drills down and takes me into another part of the application, and I can see the controls that are being put in place and the progress and notes, etc. So really easy ability to navigate around through any of these particular areas. Now something that RMSS has an innovation patent on is the capability of reassessing risk in a number of different risk assessment models that the client may wish to use. So as we can see, these risks are distributed accordingly here. If I've got access to another model, which I have at the moment, so when I say model, another risk assessment framework with a corresponding matrix, if I select that matrix, the application then recalculates these risks and places them in the right order based on the consequence definitions and likelihood definitions, in this case of this particular model. And we've gone from a 4-class model where we had low, moderate, high, extreme, or very high I think it was, to low, moderate, high, very high and extreme. So we've got a 5-class model. So you can have as many different classes and models as you operate. Now what this means is that, you know, if you've got a project, it's a $30,000 project, you've got a contractor involved that say is $25,000 of that, you can identify the management of that contract as a high risk to that project. But when that then gets viewed in your corporate model, it may come out as a low risk because it might even be a rounding error on your organisation. So these are examples of the types of things that we can do in the dashboard. This here is another risk score chart which is showing the cumulative risk over time. So the heat map was showing the individual risk by various master categories. This risk chart is showing the accumulation of all of those master categories over time. Same process, we can drill down and access that. The next part of the process is in our events or incidents area, and this is showing me a list of those. I can sort them by location or incident number or anything that I need to do. I can also look at some predefined filters such as events I'm investigating or events I've recorded. I've got the ability to do the same thing, and of course if I want to access any of them I just have to click on the incident number and it takes me straight into the application at that point in time. If I look here at, if I look here at audits, I've got the ability to see all of the audits that are occurring for my group. I can look at audits that are assigned to me, and I can see I've got, a 4801, I've got some 18,000 self-assessments, some 9,000 corporate governance questionnaires, workplace inspections, whatever it might be. So I could say, look, I want to know how I'm going in terms of my corporate governance questionnaire. I can select on that, and it comes through and it shows me my current status, because I may have been filling it out earlier. Then I can go into any of the sections here and commence answering the questions in relation to how I'm going. I can look at any examples or further information that belongs to them, etc. And I've got the ability to to complete this and continue through it as I need to. Save that. And then once I've completed that, I can just simply hit the house on the left, and that takes me back to my dashboard at any stage. So it's very easy to navigate, very simple to use, no keyboard sort of use is required. And finally, as we all know, one thing that is common in these processes is that everything, whether it's a risk management process, an event management process, or incident management process, anything to do with compliance, one of the outcomes of all of those work areas is that we have actions that we need people to do. And action management is one of the key challenges within an organisation in terms of managing these processes. And the dashboard here at the RMSS Suite is designed to help you with that, that difficult task. So effectively, all of the actions, regardless of the source, come together in one place. And we can see all of those listed out here. You've got the ability to mark them complete or indeed add them to your calendar at any point in time. You can drill down into any of them, of course, by using the ID numbers there. It takes you straight into the detail. There are some predefined filters such as open actions or actions assigned to me or overdue actions. And there's a really valuable search field here where I can simply put a keyword in, might be a keyword around the action or some component about the assessment, whatever it might be, and it will reduce that list that I have available to me there to those that are simply, related to that keyword that I've typed in. Okay, so look, that gives us a very good feel of what we call our dashboard. And the dashboard, as you've seen, it's not just about looking at pretty pictures, it's actually about navigation and changing of the application. So it's one page, it's very, very simple to use. You already know how to use it, it's point and poke. If you've got an iPad, you can use your finger. If you've got a laptop, you use your mouse. It's very, very simple to operate. Some of the other areas in terms of getting some information in I'd like to show you, I think I've got about 3 or 4 minutes of time left, is just to give you a bit of an indication of some of the way that data is entered into the application. So we look here at the notify screen. This is using the event area. And to get into this particular area of the application, you don't need to be a user. So anyone can notify you of anything that's occurring in the organisation. And the beauty about this is that if you select, from a drop-down list of forms, it might be I want to make a complaint, then you're going to get a question about the complaint that you want the person to fill in. But if I select, I want to know about an injury or illness, or I want to let you know about that, you then get a totally different form. And each of these forms are 100% flexible, 100% capable to be built for your current terminology. And when I say build, it's a user feature. It's something that we'll do for you in the first instance, but it's a user function that we perform. And then you've got the ability to manage that on an ongoing basis and change those forms. So once somebody lets you know about something, you've got the ability then to have that automatically routed through to different parts of different people in the organisation, and then they can make decisions about whether indeed this is something that we want to classify as an incident, or alternatively we just want to manage by saying thanks very much and archiving the communication. We've got the ability to do things like view what's been sent. Really importantly, we can approve it without an investigation and send an email, or we can approve it with an investigation. We've also got the ability to send it back to the person and say, look, it's not filled out correctly, we need to give you some more information. Or alternatively, we've got the ability to delete it if we've got the permissions. So, very, very powerful processes. In terms of the balance of the application, don't really have a lot of time to go through it, except to say that each of the modules have their own menu structure. Risk is very simple. Identify, assess, control, and monitor, the 4 pillars of the standards, the 4 workflows. Identification of risk is an assessment of risk and controls. This is where you look at existing controls as well as future controls. This is where you can establish your risk appetite and look at a target risk score. There's a number of capabilities around that process. And if, for example, in here, it's just simply 4 screens, very easy to follow. The first 3 screens themselves are data entry screens. If you look at the compliance tool, then we have 4 key areas. We have obligations management, which is where we can establish various obligations that we have as an enterprise. We can profile those obligations and assign them out to people and have assurance programs built around them. We've got the ability to use those assurance programs are driven by the auditing function, which is an ability to create unlimited templates and audits in the application. We've got an observations manager, which I said you can establish as an icon on your intranet and allow people just to let you know about safety observations or whistleblower or compliance breaches or whatever it might be, but it's people sending you information. And then we've got a survey manager. So the difference between the survey manager and the audit manager is the survey is more about qualitative analysis, whereas the audit's about quantitative analysis. So the audits pass, fail, comply, non-comply, scores and counts, whereas the survey manager is more about just collecting data, information, feedback, etc. Our event manager that you've seen goes through the process of notification and then recording, putting in place investigations, having the ability to do corrective actions. And look, with investigations, we've got a number of different models. We've got a simplified root cause analysis process, as well as a more complicated storyboard, more like an Apollo process. And we've got, obviously, the ability to build in corrective actions, etc. All of it's driven around an automated communication and notification process that's driven through escalations based on triggers that you select, etc. Now, I've not taken a breath in 35 minutes. I've tried to get as much information and pack it in as I can. I think any more I'm going to send you numb, or I'm going to go blue in the face, or both. So what I'd like to do now is say thank you very much for attending and listening.